perfect fit. And as it turns out, it has been. And so what I do is really provide the overall leadership for the department, kind of the strategic vision. We do work in a hierarchy, and so I do get to put out priorities regarding where I believe we should be pushing ourselves. I think when you're the director, the job is really about connecting dots. You can see what everyone's working on. I can see what's happening in other departments. And really my job is trying to facilitate the work of the staff and really to get our programs through the city council. The most frustrating part of my job is that ultimately the city council makes the decisions about what we're going to move forward on or not. And while I would love to be the queen of housing, I am not the queen. And so the staff produces its best work. We all produce our best work, but we don't get to decide if we're going to get to go forward with that work or how it finally is shaped. So I would say that's the most frustrating part. But the most exciting part is, the reason I decided to work within government was because I believe strongly and passionately about social justice. And there are some people who have to do it on the outside, and we need them. We need activists and advocates pushing us to do more. And what I realized is that I understand regulation and policy really well, and I hope that I can interpret it well and communicate it well, and that I don't appear to be a scary, although I think some of the council members do believe I'm way over to the left. In reality, I believe I can communicate a more moderate position when I need to, and a more progressive position when I can. And so I thought I can work on the inside because I understand the human, the justice side. And I can be effective because I can be a voice within government making those changes.
That's interesting. And taking a step back, and seeing where you are right now, what advice would you give a younger you, in terms of educational routes, maybe internships or volunteer opportunities?
So the one thing I regret in my housing career that I didn't do was that I didn't get a degree in planning. And one of the reasons why I regret it now is because for one thing, there are very few housing jobs departments in the country. You have to be a big enough city in order to have the scale of housing work, or it be elevated enough for someone to have a department on it. So we're really fortunate in San Jose we have that. But the reason why I always regretted not having a planning degree is because the majority of the tools around housing reside in the planning department because they control land use. So in smaller cities, it's not unusual to have the housing department in a planning department or in an office of economic development. It really depends on how the city sees the work. And so it's taken me a while to understand a completely foreign field of planning. And it's really important, right? How you develop housing, the process it has to go through, all gets controlled through this other department. And so I wish I had learned more about the planning process earlier in my career. What I did learn was that at one point I worked for a private developer. And so I think the one thing I would encourage people to do is not be afraid to try a diversity of opportunities. I worked for nonprofits. I worked for a for-profit, which I have to say, and if there's a for-profit person here, please do not be offended. But since I had worked my entire career in city government or in nonprofits, when I actually worked for a for-profit and I really realized they were working for the money. I was like, oh my God, people really do that. I had no idea. Like we were all about like how much money could we make and could we make more? It just never, I just didn't realize uh, how that permeate. Now I worked for a large developer and anyway, so they were shocked when I decided to go back into the public sector because for them it was like I was going to make way more money if I stayed with them, and they were like, "Why would you ever do that for that amount of money?" They couldn't understand that. So I would encourage spread your wings. Uh, the funny thing was for me in my life, I was always with partners who discouraged me from spreading my wings because they were like, no, you need to stay with the city, or that's too risky to take that job, or you don't know where you're going to end up. And I didn't never listened to that. I just listened to myself and said, I think it'd be kind of interesting to try this or to be different. And I was willing to take those risks. And I would encourage people to take risks and to try different jobs until you find what you really love. Because we all spend way too much time working to not love what we do.
Mhm. Definitely. What are some of the best practices you would suggest to network in the housing field?
Well, in the Bay Area, I would say SV at Home is one of the best ways. We're fortunate that we have SV at Home that creates opportunities like this and has, well, when we were not in the COVID world, but would have these monthly gatherings where you could meet and talk with different professionals in the field. So I think staying involved with SV at Home is great. If you're not in this particular area, NPH also has a similar group and activities. And again, this world is very small, the housing world. And San Jose is very small. So once you make those initial connections, you just can continue through those routes.
Awesome. Thanks for that great advice. Anna, do we have any questions out there?
I don't see any in the chat, but does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand.
I have a question. Yes. Hi, Jackie.
Hi.
I'm really, I was going to say tickled. It sounds weird. I'm very excited by this encouragement to navigate different sectors and to do these different tackings throughout your career. I know that sometimes goes against it definitely goes against the grain where people expect you to work longer at fewer companies. Did you notice a certain resistance or pushback in your different recruitment processes and job interviews, and how did you address that?
Actually, it was because I had that diversity in my background that I got my first job being the director of housing for the city of Denver. Mayor Hickenlooper came from the private sector, and so he was looking for somebody who had private sector experience, nonprofit experience, and city, and I had all of that, and that's rare. And so I think there are people who do appreciate the diversity, and especially when you work for a city. I also worked for the city of Boulder, which is more akin to like a Berkeley here, but there was this kind of attitude of staff, and I also got it as well, where we believed we were doing the work of God and protecting the city from the development community. And what I learned from working for a private developer was looking at the problem from the other side and seeing the frustration of trying to actually work a project through a city. And when staff has attitudes about it, how challenging that is. And it really got me to the point where I believe that our role is to try to get the best project out of it. It's not to stop development. It's to get the best out of that development that we can. So I would say most people want people who are, and I know when I look for somebody, it doesn't even sometimes matter if they have a housing background anymore to me. As it is you're smart, you can write, you can think. There are very few jobs in the industry, except for like underwriting jobs where it does help to have that background, but we can teach you anything else. If you're smart and you can learn, we can teach you the work. When I had no experience in housing when I first took on a housing job, I did it, and I didn't even care about housing when I first entered the field. I thought it was going to be a temporary job. I got a housing job because I needed to find something, and it was going to pay. It was full time, and I thought I could do it during graduate school. I was running a home ownership program for the city of Boulder. And I learned it and then realized how much I loved it, and which is why I stayed. But the one thing I think is really important about career development is knowing where you want to go and knowing what your next step is going to be. Often when I talk to my staff, and sometimes for people who end up being in a city, people believe, well, I've been there for 20 years, I deserve the promotion. And I'm always like, no, it has nothing to do with your time spent. It has to do with what do you want to do and what do you bring to the job and why do you want the job? And I decided pretty early in my housing career, and I don't even know why, but I was like, I want to be the director. And so once I decided that, I just thought about what were the steps that I needed to get there. And I knew supervision was important. So I went to my boss and I said, I need to supervise somebody because if my career is going to advance, I need people under me. And so, they were happy to do that. So thinking about where you want to go and what your next steps are, I think is really important if you want to achieve that final outcome.
What a great question and an awesome segue into what's one thing you're learning now and why is it important?
So I said I have this justice background and wanted to do this work because I thought I could push the envelope from the inside. But it hasn't been until these last 2 years when we as a city have said, yes, we're going to work on equity issues, that I realized I could be doing more. I think of myself as someone who's more an inward facing type of leader. I don't typically like to go out running around talking. When I think of the difference, when I think about Biden and I think about, he inspires people and he's a great speaker and he lifts the community. I'm just not like that at all. And what I've learned though from the equity work we're doing is that I could have been doing more all this time. And I'm grateful that I'm doing it now, and I'm learning so much from my staff and from other people about how to be a better leader and how to support everyone in their leadership growth. So that's what I'm learning now, and it is deeply important to me, which is why I'm so excited also to continue to do the job, is because I feel like we have a teeny tiny window. So I'm telling you all, we have a teeny tiny window where people care about equity. And in San Jose, we have a council that cares about it. But, we get elected, there are elections every 2 years, so God knows what will happen. So we care about this issue now, and I want to encourage each and every one of you to push as hard as you can, because the opportunity is now. And I don't know how long it will exist. So my commitment now is I am pushing as hard as I can. What sticks, sticks, but we're going to push now while we can.
Oh, that's awesome. Anna, do we have another question?
We just got one from Cameron. If you want to unmute Cameron, or if you prefer me to ask the group.
I guess I'll just ask the question. Yeah, just wondering if the city or the housing department has any good collaboration projects with any upcoming developers. They could be profit or for profit or nonprofit. just curious if there's any good collaboration with developers.
Well, our most recent, I think, collaboration was with developers was when the city with the county and Destination Home and the Housing Authority made a commitment that we were going to start investing in permanent supportive housing. And that was about 5 years ago, which is kind of shocking that in San Jose 5 years ago, we did not have 100% permanent supportive housing facility in San Jose, which is, again, 10th largest city in the country. And you know how homelessness impacts the city and how many homeless people live outside. So we had no 100% permanent supportive housing. The county passed Measure A, and we collectively, all of us came together, which is also very unusual, but we all came together and we said, okay, developers, we want you to do permanent supportive housing. And the initial response from the development community, both nonprofit and for-profit, was, sure, we'll do it. We have 100 units, we'll give you 5. And I was like, oh my gosh, if you give us 5, it's going to take us 1,000 years before we solve this problem. We can't wait. I need you to do 100. I need you to do all of them. And every developer except for First Community Housing said no. So First Community Housing said yes. And Second Street Studios is our first in the San Jose 100% permanent supportive housing development to get funded and built. But it has become now more of a collaboration between us and the developers regarding how do we do it and how do we do it better. So Destination Home, the county, the city are about ready to do an institute on doing permanent supportive housing with our developers to do some best practices, to learn from each other on, what have we done well, what have we not done so well, how can we improve? But because it has been new for all of us, we strongly believe we can improve, but we all need to be at the table learning together.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome news. That is an awesome opportunity for collaboration, and definitely something that, we could all benefit from learning more about. So, taking a step back, in really thinking about where you are now and where you were 5 years ago at the beginning of your career, what are some entry-level jobs that you'd recommend for people who want to enter into the public sector?
Well, the entry-level jobs in my world we have analyst positions that don't require the same level of expertise as the higher level positions. But again, I believe it's all about how you sell yourself. So my undergraduate degree is American Studies with a Women's Studies certificate. And when I graduated from college, I was like, no one is going to hire an American Studies major. Like, people don't even know what that means. And so what I said it meant was, I want to be a social worker. I have a women's studies degree. I learned all about women in college. And, really, I'd be a great social worker because I understand the dynamics of women and single women and mothers and blah, blah, blah. And anyways, I was able to sell myself with no experience, which was kind of bad because I became a case manager for single moms who were on welfare, and I was terrible at it because I could not relate to the job at all, and didn't have children. I still don't have children. So anyway, but I was able to do it, I guess was my point, whether I was good or bad at it. And I think that's the key, really, is, again, where do you want to dip your toe and try it? And then how do you relate your experience, or if you don't have the experience, the skill set? You know how to write, you know how to think, you're good with numbers, whatever it is, you're reading what the employer is looking for, and you're taking those key qualities and you're reflecting on your experience, and you're showing how you were able to use those skills in your past jobs and how you will use those skills if you're hired.
Mm-hmm.
And you answer the questions. I'm in a lot of hiring panels, and I cannot tell you how many times people don't answer the question. They ramble. Answer the question. It's better to say less and be thoughtful and be specific than it is to just say everything.
Awesome. Anna, back to you. Any questions out there?
There are questions that are perfect for what we just discussed. So the first is from Guadalupe, if you would like to unmute, and then after that is Danny, I believe.
Oh, hi. My name is Guadalupe Morales. I'm majoring in interpreting, and I'm curious to know if there are any job opportunities for Spanish interpreters in the near future and the affordable housing workforce.
There's a huge opportunity because San Jose, again, this is the time, kick in the door, when I would say we did not do as good of a job, and San Jose, frankly, can still do a better job. And we know, I think my first stat was 60% of households in Santa Clara County speak another language, not English, in their household. So there is a tremendous need for Spanish speakers. In housing, we do, we're one of the few cities that has a rent stabilization program. We have a significant group of people who live in our housing that only speak Spanish. We are constantly looking for people who can speak Spanish in order to do the work, do the housing work in Spanish. And I think, especially now in cities where we're being asked, and rightly so, the traditional way of holding a public meeting is we do it at City Hall, people come. And what we found is it's the same people who come, people who understand the system. But if we truly want to get the voice, especially now, we're saying COVID-19 has shown the huge income disparities. We have to go out into the community. In Guadalupe, we need people who speak Spanish, who can go out into the community and actually hold public meetings on behalf of our departments. So I think there's a huge opportunity within city government to think about how we deliver services in other languages, especially the critical outreach that we do in policy level or in actual service itself.
And then I'm going to kick it over to Danny. You had a few questions, if you want to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I do have a million questions, and I'll try to kind of compartmentalize them. The first one I interjected as you were describing the kind of entry level at the city level. What is an analyst position? Like, what does that look like? That means a lot of things in a lot of different industries. So that was one. I can actually let you answer that, and then I have a second question that's unrelated.
Sure. We have analyst is a general classification in the city. So actually it can mean a tremendous amount of things. So I'll give you examples of probably 3 different analysts we have in housing. So we have an analyst in the grants department that essentially are negotiating with nonprofits contracts. The housing department gets HUD funding. Right now we have over $100 million in funding because of COVID-19. So we have to get that money out into the community. So the analysts are actually setting up those contracts, negotiating the terms with the nonprofits, and then monitoring them to ensure they did what they're supposed to do. Versus the analysts that work in our rent stabilization program that are actually delivering a service. Versus the analysts that might work in our project development side that are actually doing policy work, where they're helping to facilitate community meetings, or they might be providing support to some of the underwriters. So it can mean a tremendous differentiation in the departments.
Got it. Thank you. That's one of the reasons I think from the outside it's kind of confusing sometimes, is because that same label is applied to so many different kinds of roles.
It is, that's true.
My next question is,
can I interject just for a quick second before that next question?
Yes.
We know some of you might need to leave early, but before you head out, we're going to launch just a brief little questionnaire on this fireside chat. And we hope you might take just a few minutes of your day and give us a little bit of feedback. Danny, back to you. Thanks for that.
Oh, thank you for soliciting some feedback. My next question is, what is one of the most challenging things about working with newcomers to housing versus working with people who already understand the system? I think you kind of referenced that with respect to both holding meetings to learn from the community, but also what are the barriers to innovation? Is it not knowing how the system works, or not being able to think outside of the system, or is it something different completely?
So if I'm understanding your question, I mean, I think the hardest challenge of coming into a city, if you've never worked in a city, is the bureaucracy. So I have had friends who I recruited into city jobs who just hated it because they couldn't stomach the work, because they couldn't stomach the timelines and the process. Or, you know, when I worked for a strong mayor, there's, you know, San Jose is run by a city manager. So sometimes in city government, if you are run by a mayor, it can feel like decisions are made politically versus made on analytical, policy-driven, data-driven, community-driven work. And that can be really frustrating. And, you know, one of the roles, my job is to keep that politics out of it as best as I can, but that can be hard. So we do have a bunch of processes and requirements. And sometimes, I mean, what's great about having a new face in the crowd is I'm as guilty as other, you know, I forget, like, oh yeah, we created these rules. We can easily change these rules. But we forget that. And sometimes that's the best thing about bringing a new person in with new ideas and a fresh perspective, because they're like, God, that makes no sense. Why do you do this? Oh. But learning our complicated rules can be very frustrating and hard. And I say it takes a full year. If you're in a city, it takes a full year to like get us, because we work on a cycle, at least in San Jose. And you have to go through that whole year to get the cycle.
In a time where you referenced like how urgent it is to move fast, how are cities like San Jose like working around that bureaucracy to make action happen faster?
You know, I have to say, we just happen to have been positioned in the right place. We were asking ourselves the right questions. So I don't know if we would have been able to move fast, but we're in the middle of doing a fair housing plan that we had just decided. We didn't care if Trump said you don't need to do it. We were still going to do it. And now it's perfectly positioned us. And okay, you really want to talk about equity, City of San Jose? I'm going to give you a full menu of real things you could do to make a difference on the policy level that will begin to dismantle racism in San Jose. We just happen to have been ready because we said, we're not listening to what Trump says. We're doing what we think we should be doing. So you know, part of it is knowing where you're at and what you have done that you can usher forward more quickly, and put aside things that aren't meeting that objective. So for example, the council wanted me to work on a JPA for moderate income households that would have really redirected our efforts. I don't typically go to council and say, no, can't do it, don't want to do it, but we did. Even though they told us to do it, I came back and said, no, you know, we did everything you asked, but we still think it's a really bad idea given the time frame. And it was painful, but they eventually supported us. So being able to take the risk to say no to this and allow us to do the work that we're doing now has been really hard, but you know, I'm at the end of my career, so I feel like I'm out there. I'm just gonna do it because once I'm done with this, I'm done. So I'm just gonna take every risk I can.
Awesome. Anna, I think we have time for one more question before we got to wrap up.
I think Marissa had a question from the chat.
Yeah, I did actually have a question from Anthony. They say the housing field seems pretty patriarchal in this region, excuse me. Do you feel that as women of color that the collaborative work on racial equity is being done to address that fact? And what do you see changes in the landscape in the future?
I definitely think, yes. I mean, when you look at just again the demographics of San Jose, we do not see people of color in leadership positions. And so that definitely has to change. And I think it's hard for people to give up power, number one. And I have to say, one of the things I have found striking in San Jose is that people are still learning about what this issue means. We're still in the learning phase. And so I think it's going to take time and it's going to be frustrating, but I just need you to know on my side, I'm just keeping to push to say for every position that I see being opened, what is that an opportunity for a person of color to be promoted? Is that an opportunity for us in the city to do more? And I think the nonprofits are asking themselves as well, are these times and opportunities? And we're seeing real efforts to try to make change, but I think it will take some time.
What a rich, rich question and a rich conversation. Really meaty stuff. Jacky, we really, on our careers in affordable housing working group, want to thank you so very, very much for your time today and your insights. Is there, if there is a way for people who might want to do follow-up questions to you to reach out to you, let us know or put it in the chat. And we'll get you connected. We'll get your questions to Jacky or however we can connect up or find someone who can answer your questions otherwise. But we want to thank you all for joining us a lot. Please stay connected. Take a look for future events out there. This is Affordable Housing Month in Silicon Valley. There are so many events that are happening throughout the county. In Santa Clara, so a comprehensive listing of them is listed on Silicon Valley at Home's webpage. And then also we'd like to take the shameless opportunity to plug our next Coho event, but it's a great conversation, a great panel on social housing coming up on March 27th at 6 p.m. So, you know, it's after dark, it's housing after dark, right? But thank you again. We really appreciate all of you spending your lunch hour with us on this Friday, and we hope to see you again at other Coho events.
Great. So I did put my email in the chat. So if people wanted to email me, hopefully at some point, it sounds like we're going to be able to start gathering again. So we're going to have those monthly meetings with SV at Home. Please feel free to come up, chat to me. Feel free to email me, ask me to lunch. I'm there.
Thank you, Jacky.
Thank you, Jacky. This was really great. It's great information.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining.